So obviously this is again Paul writing during one of his many, many imprisonments for declaring that Jesus is Lord. I don't know about you, but during that worship I was just emotional. I think I was feeling the presence of the Spirit. And it's just, I think the two things that just stuck out maybe is just during the worship is the fact that it's a living hope. Like the whole essence is that Jesus is still alive. And that's the reason there's the hope, because he is Lord. He's reigning now in heaven and on this earth. Minnie's seen if I've got my Bible, just checking it with me. And that's what we'll see really in this. I'm just going to do a little 15-minute, hopefully, overview of the book of Colossians. But I think what the main point really is to take away is that Paul is warning the people in Colossae of potential false teachings about Jesus, or about keeping to the law and the circumcision, etc. Or there's another one, which is the Gnostics, which is basically saying that Jesus is just one of many gods that you can follow. And when we were worshipping then, I was challenged because, I mean, that's the challenge, isn't it? Is to keep the significance of what Jesus did in the forefront of our minds. And that's what the Gnostics try to do. So the Gnostics are the people that believe that more knowledge is sort of a link into the spiritual realm. So the more knowledge you have, the more holy you are. And there's a secret level of knowledge. And they believe that Jesus is just one of them, one of the gods to follow. So I think that's just the key to have in our minds, that what people will try to do is to play down the significance of Jesus. Yeah. It's in our lives to play down what Jesus has done. Yeah, Jesus, he's just a nice guy. Yeah, he existed, he did some miracles, but he wasn't God, or he wasn't king. And I think just as we're worshipping then, with arms high and heart abandoned, I was challenged to keep that idea at the forefront. So, last week, it's just a sort of a what, why, who, what, when, whatever those 5 things are. I'm going to try and stick to a few of them. So, to whom? So, obviously, the church in Colossae. So, as far as we know, Paul never actually went to Colossae. He's writing from prison, and he's definitely not the founder of the church. So unlike a lot of the books and the churches that Paul writes to, so Ephesus, etc., Paul would have actually gone and set those up. But for this one, Paul is not the founder of the church. And we see that in Acts, where you follow Paul's journey, and nowhere along that journey does it take Paul into Colossae or nearby. So the church was most likely started by Epaphras. So if you've read the book this week, so he's visited Paul, and he's updated Paul of how well it's going in Colossae. And as a result, Paul then writes this book to encourage the rest of the church who haven't met with him. So some people think that Paul, so scholars believe that Epaphras, so who's come to Paul, was actually converted by Paul in one of his times in, I think it's Ephesus. So down the road from Colossae is Ephesus, so when we read Ephesians, they're quite nearby. And the scholars believe that Epaphras would have been an early convert of Paul's missionary journey, and as a result, gone back to Colossae and started the church. So it's most likely have been in the house of Philemon. So if you've read the book of Philemon, this is the house that the church was supposed to be in. So it was a house church, and him and his wife Aphia, and was led by Epaphras. So as a result, the city of Colossae, it would have been a lot of Gentiles. So non-Jewish people would have been the large majority of the church. But some 200 years before Christ, the Greek king, let me find his name to double check, King Antiochus III, had actually deported 2,000 Jews to Colossae. So this is 200 years before Jesus and then Paul. He so didn't want the Jews to be in their city that they actually deported 2,000 of them to Colossae. So in our heads, when we're reading this book, there is actually a good chunk of Jewish people in Colossae. But I think the main Gentiles, the main aspect of the book would have been to Gentiles, but with a little bit of Jewish flavour, which is why if you've read the book, there seems to be a double warning from Paul. Be careful of the Jewish people, the false teachers that come in and saying you have to stick to the law, and be careful of the pagans and the Gnostics on the other side. So where is Colossae? So we're thinking, where is it? If people say, yeah, the book of Colossians is great. So in biblical times, it's near Lycia, which is known as Western Asia Minor in biblical times. Or in our days, it's on the south coast near the island of Rhodes, which is modern-day Turkey. So we're going Lycia, don't have a clue where that is. Western Asia Minor, no idea. Just think Turkey near Rhodes, if anyone's been that side. So that's what we're talking about. So last week we talked a bit about Paul coming into Europe, and this is sort of on the edge by Ephesus and there. So having to think a little bit about Colossae, just to give you some context. It was a major city near the Meander River in the Lycus Valley. And therefore there was lots of trade routes going through. So it was a big city. A lot of people say there was a lot of different, it was multi-ethnic and diverse as a result, because it was such a popular trade route. So it says it enjoyed considerable wealth and prestige. Due to its strong commercial influences, it had a diverse cosmopolitan population with their distinct religious and cultural influences. And actually, I don't think we've seen it nowadays, but Colossians are actually famous for a certain type of wool. It was a red wool called Colossian wool. So there's some useless knowledge for you guys, if anyone asks. You could go, have you heard of Colossian red wool? And they say no, and you say, well, I have now. And you thank me later. So when was this book written? So scholars believe that it was written in the early AD 60s when Paul wrote this book. But there's disputes, which isn't very helpful for us, and I'm trying to give a quick overview. But there's disputes among scholars of when he wrote this. So most scholars believe that he was in prison in Rome when he wrote this. When he wrote his 4 letters, Colossians, Ephesians, Philemon, and Philippians in Rome. But others believe it may have been when he was in prison in Ephesus or Caesarea. So it's not very helpful for us to know, but I think we can feel good that if the scholars who spend their whole lives trying to find out don't 100% know, then that can make us feel a bit better if we also don't 100% know. So not long after Paul writes this letter, Colossae is actually struck by an earthquake, and it would take them many years to get over it. So we hear more about Ephesus later on, because they built back after the earthquake a bit quicker. So Colossae then sort of was in ruins, and then was never really the city it once was. So we've done a bit of the who, what, why, but then what, well, we haven't done why yet, because I'm going to be doing it now, but why write this? So what was Paul's purpose? So it seems to be there's two aspects to what Paul was writing about. He seems to be wanting to promote unity in the church and devotion to Jesus. So saying, come on guys, let's keep together, be devoted to Jesus. And also to quash the heresy that he was potentially hearing about. So unity in the church and to quash heresy. So we see in Colossians 1, I'm going to jump just quickly into the Bible, verse 13 to 14. He just says, he says, he has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sin. So he says, and in this one it just says, who purchased our freedom and forgave our sins. So Paul's just encouraging them to, you've been given freedom. There's unity and devotion in Jesus. And Tim Mackey, who does the Bible Project videos, if any of you like him, he says about this book, he says, no part of human existence remains untouched by the loving and liberating rule of Jesus. So Paul is trying to get people to see, a bit like I was saying at the start, that actually it's all of you. No part of your life has not been affected by Jesus. That's a bit about what Sam was singing about at the end. It's like, have everything. Have all of it. All my heart abandoned. And Paul's trying to say, if you believe in Jesus and you give your life to Jesus, that affects everything. And we'll see when I get just a bit to the bit that I feel like God wants me to share in Colossians 3. It means a complete life change. It means transformation, and that's actually the evidence of Jesus in your life. And we'll see, we won't get to it if you hope you've seen the books, when he talked about reshaping the household, he talks about husbands and wives, children, slaves. So the standard Roman household, he's saying no more. Change it, completely change around. And sometimes we see it with our eyes and go, oh, Paul's, he's still saying slaves love you, love your masters, and masters love your slaves. That's like completely outrageous for him to say that in that culture. So for now we go, well, slave, that's terrible. But for him to go, treat them and love them like your own family is completely countercultural. So sometimes we need the context of the area to realise how radical Paul's teachings are. And because he says in Colossians 3, verse 11, he says, in this new life, it doesn't matter if you are Jew or Gentile, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbaric, uncivilized, slave or free. Christ is all that matters, and he lives in all of us. So the first point is Paul saying it doesn't matter now. Now you love Jesus. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter whether you're one of those or the other. So he's sometimes not saying he's not for slavery necessarily, but he's saying it doesn't matter now. You can do whatever, but Jesus is the main thing. It doesn't define you anymore of who you are. So the second thing, just a quick overview, is quashing the heresy in the church. So false teachings. So scholars actually don't know whether there was official false teachers there at the time in the church, because Paul writes very generically about the problem. So he says, I think it says, don't let anyone capture you with empty philosophies and high-sounding nonsense that comes from human thinking and from the spiritual powers of this world, rather than from Christ. So Paul's saying, beware. He's not necessarily, like we read last week, he was very specific, saying, don't let those dogs mutilate the flesh and things like that. He knew exactly who he was speaking about. But scholars sometimes think maybe it was a generic idea, a warning for the future. Perhaps maybe sometimes when we hear stuff in church, it doesn't sit in our spirit now, but then later on down the line we'll go, oh yeah, I remember that. And perhaps that's what Paul's doing now. He's saying, guys, look out. Look out. It's a general plea. So he doesn't speak to them about by name, which he does in some other books. Go, look out for this person, don't listen to this person, which is very confident of Paul to say. He says in Colossians 2, verse 4, I say this in order that no one may delude you with plausible arguments. So he's saying, guys, they might sound all right. These arguments might sound good, but you're being deluded. And I think that's where I started the point, was people will say Jesus isn't as important as you think. That he didn't go and do all the things that we say he did. That he hasn't done all the things that he said he has in your life. And actually, we need to do what they did and actually stay firm in that. Let's not downplay the significance of Jesus, of what he did in our life. Because if we understood it, it does demand everything about our lives. Nothing can remain untouched by Jesus' love if we understand exactly what he did. So there's two cultural pressures. So I know this might not be as relevant for us, but cultural pressures that they had was mystical polytheism. So lots of gods was the first one. So, Zeus, Hermes, Apollos, all those type of gods, they were really popular there because it's sort of a Greek city, which some of us might be familiar with. So Paul's dealing with that, loads of other gods, and if we maybe relate it to us, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, whatever that may be, there's loads of other things fighting for the attention. So Paul's just going, so there was actually a popular cult of Cybele, she's called, the great mother goddess of fertility. So she was one of the key ones that they worshipped there. So Paul's dealing with this. When he's thinking of writing, he's going, how can I help you guys realise that Jesus is the king, Jesus is the one, not these random gods and goddesses. So that's how some people are looking to corrupt Christianity with mysticism and saying, Jesus, yeah, great, but he's just one of those. He's just one of the many people that we can follow. One of the many people that you can worship. And Paul's going, no, just the one. And the other one he's just doing is the Jewish people that are strict on the laws of Torah. We've seen this loads of times. Guys, you've got to eat kosher foods. You've got to be circumcised. All that sort of stuff. And Paul says in Colossians 2, if we've read it, he just says, so don't let anyone condemn you for what you eat or drink, or for not celebrating certain holy days, or new moon ceremonies, or Sabbaths. For these rules are only shadows of the reality yet to come, and Christ himself is that reality. Don't let anyone condemn you by insisting on pious self-denial. So self-denial that makes you look good, or the worship of angels. Their sinful minds have made them proud. So Paul's saying that actually Christianity can be corrupted through legalism. So you might be going, sorry, what's legalism? You're talking absolute nonsense today. It's just thinking that you're made holy and that you're close to God by following rules. That's all it means. Simple. So Paul's trying to say, as he has in so many of his books, it's not about following the rules, guys. It's not going, God will love me more if I abide by X, Y, Z. Yes, we love it, read the Bible together, it's been great. But that doesn't make us holier, it doesn't make us look better. God doesn't love me more because I've read my Bible. So that's what Paul's saying as well. It's not about strict rules, it's about Christ and what he has done. And so when we come and we worship God, church is about worshipping God. We're coming together. It might look different, but we're worshipping God. The idea of church is praise and worship to Jesus for what he's done. Not about what can I get from church. What can I get from Jesus today? It's what can I give to him? And I think that's what Paul's sort of saying to us. It's not about how we live. So perhaps that's a challenge for us. Let's not stop making it about us. Let's stop making life about us and about Jesus. And I just want to do a key takeaway. Just maybe what I got, one of the main things that I got from this passage is the bit Sam read at the start, Colossians 3. Since you've been raised to new life with Christ, set your sights on the reality of heaven, where Christ sits in the place of God, of honour at God's right hand. And then he says, after he goes about Christ, he says, so put to death the sinful things lurking in you. Have nothing to do with sexual immorality, impurity, lust, and evil desires. Don't be greedy, envy, anger, malicious behaviour, slander, dirty language, all these things. And then he says, in this new life, it doesn't matter if you're Jew or Gentile, circumcised or uncircumcised, etc. But he then says, put on your new self. In verse 10, put on your new nature and be renewed as you learn to know your Creator and become like him. So just a challenge for us, it's an active thing. Put on your new life. Take off the old things. Actively going, I'm not going to do those things anymore. Jesus, help me not to do those things anymore. I'm going to put on these good things. Tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, love. Clothe yourselves in love. But it's just a challenge, it's an active thing. So John Tyson, who runs a church in New York, who I listen to quite a lot, he says, we will not drift into devotion or glide into godliness. So guys, by sitting around and just coming, we're not going to look like Jesus by just sitting around and just going by with the flow and doing the same thing each day. We will not drift into devotion or glide into godliness. So if we put heaven first, we need to actively go, I'm taking off these things. That's not me anymore. It's your old self. It's died, as we found out in an older book. You've died to your old self, new life, but we've got to put it on. It won't happen just by sitting around. You've got to take the effort to go, I'm going to put on these things. I'm going to live this new life. And that's the main challenge really that I got from this book this week. So there we are, just a little quick overview, a little bit of my ramblings of what I thought about the book. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a better understanding about the church that he's writing to, a bit of the problems. And I just encourage you, context is really important when reading books, because sometimes we go, Paul, why do I need to know about this guy? And it really doesn't make any sense. But you can always look into it, or if you have questions, ask us as leaders or as other people. That's the whole point of this thing. But thank you for sticking with us.